Thank you guys so much for joining us once again for this exclusive interview once more with Jason Hill. I noticed last go round we had some uh, people that wanted to know more than what I was able to ask. So we have a couple of follow-up questions to kind of get clarity on. So, how are you today, good sir?
Thank you. I'm doing well. And yeah, it's kind of a little follow on. I know that you and I spoke briefly after the interview that we would talk again soon. So here we are, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on.
For sure.
So yeah, just to kind of jump in here and get going.
Okay.
First question here is how long did it take to adapt the new drivetrain? One thing that a lot of people were curious about is how long we knew that you guys knew that you were going to switch to it and how long it took to adapt it. How hard was it to adapt that kind of stuff?
Okay. That's a big, broad question. And I'm going to answer it in the following manner. Having been with the full development of the vehicle from the beginning to where we are now with production intent. So this drivetrain, this inboard drivetrain motor from Vitesco, that was actually selected prior to the in-wheel motor development. So a
Hmm.
lot of the initial packaging was done around that EMR3 or EMR4 system. I'm not sure about the terminology, but we kind of went down the path of, hey, this is going to be the drivetrain and let's package it. Then we technically switched from the inboard motor to the in-wheel motors and got running down that path and engineered a lot of that around. So then the switch back, let's say, to the inboard motor was fairly straightforward and fairly easy to accomplish from an engineering standpoint. Now, I wasn't involved in the day-to-day of that, but knowing that there was packaging constraints, in other words, we didn't have to change the body, we didn't have to change the nose, we didn't have to modify anything. We just kind of repackaged the whole front subframe. So from my adjacent point of view, it was very quick and very efficient to engineer for that because that's what the engineering team did for us in Italy and the US. They got to work and said, here's all the parameters and let's execute.
And a follow-up question to that, now that you mentioned it, when it came to the rear wheel, was the plan just to be a front-wheel drive situation when you had the Vitesco originally, or did the all-wheel drive have like a place after, like, did it have a place before you found the in-wheel motors?
Okay, another good question. If I recall, the idea for or the adaptation of the in-wheel motors allowed right away to engineer for an all-wheel drive version. And if you think about the system to get to the engineering goal, instead of engineering for adding things later, you want to start by kind of adding everything and then removing things to find your different levels. In other words, you would start with the all-wheel drive and then delete one motor to get to the two-wheel drive. And then now that changes a little bit when you go from an inboard motor to the single in-wheel motors. So that's the way I'm going to answer that one.
Fair enough. Let's see. So, what kinds of considerations did you guys make for the placement of your solar when it came to uh, how it was packaged and things like that?
You mean the solar cells and the panels
Correct.
themselves?
Yes, yes.
Um, Another great question. So we have a target, let's say, of we need to maximize the area as much as possible in order to get as much power from the sun through the cells, through the panels, and into the battery and for motive. So it's fairly logical to say, well, things above you, the sun is above you, so you want all the upper panels to gather as much sun as possible. So logically, you kind of go, well, that's the hood, that's the roof, that's the tail or the hatch area. And of course, we looked at and even did some CAD modeling and work around, well, what about if we put them on the doors and other parts of the body? Now, remember, we have a limitation on how much curve we can get. And we have also, at a certain point, there's a diminishing cost benefit analysis where, yeah, you could put more cells on it, but this was kind of a good balance and a natural balance. Like, hey, this is a lot of space, a lot more than we thought. We don't want to go too much because now you start compromising, let's say, the cost of the door. Now you have to add an extra panel on it. And you kind of find a natural balance of that. If I summarize it, it's like it's a natural result of good design and engineering system thinking.
Gotcha.
And that gives us it gives us what we need in order to get the sun into the vehicle, and it doesn't overburden, let's say, or start to have a diminishing cost return.
Gotcha.
So yeah. Now visually, that's a different story. If I think about it, if you
Hmm.
really, and if we look at the top view of the vehicle, there's a very few percentage of the vehicle, probably only 10% that's exposed when you look straight down on the vehicle. And the rest of it is taken up by solar panels. Some of it is the windshield, and some of it is obviously the wheel pants. But just from a pure aesthetic standpoint, the whole upper half of the vehicle is this solar gathering system. And
Gotcha.
it also lends itself to, being dark. So that's why the vehicle's broken out in a rhythmic way. The top is dark, the middle is light, the bottom is dark. Now that obviously changes if we do the noir, the all black edition,
Hmm.
but essentially the white and the silver, there's a rhythmic by design layout.
Okay. So that kind of leads me into another question that I had that I forgot to put on the sheet here. How did you decide what colors to make the Aptera like when you were drafting the designs? Was it more like for efficiency or cost, or was it like, oh, this looks really cool in black, or this looks awesome in white?
Let's start with that end part. In the original development of the alpha models, that black kind of came forward as this looks really, really amazing, just from a purity standpoint.
Hmm.
So, you've got the whole shape. It's all about the shape. It's all about the efficiency. And when you kind of everything has one value, it became just really powerful, let's say, especially with the contrast of the white, the all white vehicle. Silver is a very technical color for me personally, and all color is very personal to those, who want it, which is why you have so many people saying, "Well, I want this." Well, there you have the ability to do that very easily on this vehicle because you're not quote unquote wrapping the whole vehicle. You only have about 40% of the vehicle that needs to be finished in a quote unquote color. So one of the key things in the development of good design is being able to design without color and being able to evaluate either in a monochromatic or a black and white way, and then apply color as kind of a secondary consideration. So that has a lot to do with how we decide on proportion and balance. And then you introduce, like I said, like I mentioned about the rhythm of the light, dark, that
Hmm.
we do the same thing in form creation where although this is much more like automotive styling, where you create surfaces that give a rhythm. There's a highlight, then a shadow, then a highlight and a shadow. And we don't have that burden of trying to achieve a certain style. This is much more of a pure aesthetic style resulting from the purity in the math and the shape as much as possible.
Fair enough. Alrighty, so now we're going to get into a little more nitty-gritty here. How did you decide on the balance of the physical and digital controls for the Aptera? Like, was it like a consideration of how much the buttons meant to the driver, or like how was that consideration made?
All of it, and I think we touched on it before about, I mean, you have first of all, you have requirements
Hmm.
that are created by, the stakeholders, which include the end user, but also include some regulatory or, the mechanical engineering things, all of it. So you kind of lay out the requirements and then systemically go through and assign where they need to be. And it kind of naturally comes to a balance. And for example, it's much easier for us to incorporate the turn signal stalk and the wiper function on that available part than create a new one for ourselves or reinvent the way that that's going to be done, at least at this stage. Some of the controls want to be naturally on that stalk. Some of them want to be naturally on the steering yoke, and some of them have migrated. A majority of them migrated to the center screen
Hmm.
as your touch interface and your vehicle controls. Others are find their natural place because you need to have a physical button for the hazard switch, for example. And other than that, we've ended up with a mix of analog controls, for example, controlling the directional airflow from the vent system, and the digital controls, which is obviously captured mostly on the center screen.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's a collaboration, and then it kind of naturally segregates into their own place where they should be. So
Hmm.
you don't want to fight against that, but it's not a single person saying, well, this is going to be here.
Since we were talking about physical controls, could you kind of give a rundown of the physical controls in the vehicle? Like, I know about the turn stock and the manual drive modes. Like, what other
Auxiliary. Yeah, the
physical
auxiliary
systems?
manual drive modes. Well, physical systems, like everything is going to be physical for the user, right? They're physically
Hmm.
interacting with the steering yoke. There's a brake pedal and an accelerator, so those are physical interactions.
Hmm.
The the HVAC vents, those are physical interactions. Although even a touchscreen is physical interaction, but it's maybe not as tactile or as, it's much more of a push, a slide, a swipe. We don't really have a lot of other physical controls. The mirror adjustments are manual, so it's a set it and forget it, but you'll have to, it'll be a little bit more of a pain point than having a electromechanical adjustment for the
Hmm.
mirrors. And remember, the mirrors are only compliance items. They're really meant to, meet the letter of the law and have a legal product, which in order to put in the marketplace, we have to do.
Hmm.
Um, but to burden the vehicle and the cost by adding electromechanical mirror adjustments just wasn't part of the product planning, let's say.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm
The
almost
other,
immediately going to
the other
use just cameras.
physical,
Oh, sorry.
no, it's good. The other physical controls would be the manual adjustment of the seats.
Hmm.
And same equation. Is it lighter, cheaper, better, or is it more expensive, whatever cost benefit to have an electromechanical adjusted seat or have a manual seat? So the Aptera presents a unique mixture of kind of the best of both worlds.
Fair enough. Okay. This is where we're going to jump into kind of the questions from the audience, I guess you could say. Were there any unusual or interesting options that you guys explored when developing Aptera's closures, like I don't know, suicide doors or sliding doors, something like that?
Hmm. Uh, Great, fun question. Fun question. The design process included the unbelievable amount of options, such as the type of door openings, right? Whether they're coach doors. Um, Technically, we call them coach doors. The suicide door is it's kind of a bad connotation historically,
Yeah.
but the coach door where it kind of is hinged at the back, um, you know, scissor type doors, those kind of closures, hatch. We looked at side hatches, we looked at split hatches, we looked at all kinds of things like that. That's very normal to kind of see where a unique solution benefits the end product or not. And we think we've got a good mix of the unique benefits of the doors, especially as they relate to their interaction with the wheel pants,
Hmm.
right? The wheel pants still have to travel through their range of motion, and you still need to open the door no matter where the wheel pant is. So you kind of find this balance. They drive each other.
Hmm.
We could probably make wheel pants that were more aerodynamically efficient, but then you'd have to put your wheels in a certain position if you wanted to open the door, and that just becomes really burdensome
Hmm.
for the so you find the best kind of, I hate to use the word compromise. You find the best solution that satisfies the most, not demands, the most needs,
Hmm.
right? The most requisite things. So,
Gotcha.
and if it ends up bringing a little bit extra, because we really like the way the vehicle looks with the doors open, that's part of the value proposition that we talked about before.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, no, I hadn't even considered the
Closures.
door hitting the wheel pants. So that yeah, I didn't even like I was like, yeah, okay, sorry.
Same
Blowing my
same
mind over
with
here.
I'll give you another one example on the closures. You know,
Hmm.
how do we attach the hood? And it does it need to be hinged, let's say.
Hmm.
And for a long time, we were really working towards a system to have the hood panel fixed in a non-hinged way. But it turns out that a hinged way gives us a lot of benefits for two things. One is the assembly sequence, and two is the fit and flush adjustment.
Hmm.
So this kind of, even though the user won't really need to open the hood, let's say, we found that by hinging it at the back and opening it in the certain way, it really assists in the, again, assembly sequence, and then the ability to sometimes it's called gap and fit or fit and flush, so you can
Hmm.
adjust it so everything is precise. We do have an advantage with our composites where our fit and finish and the gap and flush will be absolutely precise. And this is coming from our systemic approach from assembly from CPC and our partners in that. The but let's stay with the hood for a moment. We looked at side opening, we looked at forward opening, we looked at, no opening. So you always work through a variety of solutions, and the best one usually wins
Hmm. Okay,
rather than forcing it to do something else.
gotcha. So when it comes to the tolerances for the spacing between different panels of the Aptera, are your considerations mostly aerodynamic, or do they come from like the limitations of the manufacturing process?
Both.
Gotcha.
And it's funny because a lot of times, if we stay with the aerodynamics for a second, a lot of times some of those like perceived like, oh, that's a big gap or that's a big, that's a ridge, they just don't manifest themselves in an aerodynamic loss scenario.
Hmm.
On the other side, it's really difficult to get mixed materials to be so precise, especially at a price point that we're at. When you're six figures supercar territory, yeah, you can have that 2 millimeter gap, but it also you're paying for that. So this
Hmm.
is this is a really great case where, because of the system of the SMC panels and because of the tolerances and because of the consistent ability to get the gap and or the gap and flush perfect and have it stay there, it's a really beneficial thing as opposed to a different type of automotive product.
Gotcha. Let's see. Can you identify the degree of potential for any Aptello vehicle? Okay, so when I when I wrote this question down, I was curious about specifically, you guys recently collaborated with Tello Trucks. Um, how likely is it that they would become more round as a result of interacting with you guys as a company, or that you guys would have, I don't know, a bigger payload bay or something like that?
That is purely a solar collaboration to,
Hmm.
for them to adapt or incorporate panels that we would supply to them for their
Hmm.
end user. But we've had no discussions around, kind of a influencing product one way or the other.
Okay, fair enough.
I do get to see the Tello vehicle in person tomorrow at an event here in the Los Angeles area, so I'm kind of excited about that. Obviously, been talking to them. Well, I've been talking to them for over a year, just on unrelated things, but it'll be really good to see how that manifests in real life too.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I kind of hope to see it myself one day. Let's see here. Does the efficiency numbers matching up to the projection mean that you would have like more freedom to uh, adjust little pieces of like the body or things like that if you needed to, I don't know, move it away from a pain point, or like when we talked about the wheel pant potentially hitting the door or something like that, is there more latitude now that you know that these simulations are matching real life?
Let's understand your question.
Sure.
Are you asking are we able to change things, or are you asking, do we need to change things?
Well, I'm asking if the need arose to change something, does the tests being similar to, um, is there any effect on the way that you guys can make changes now that you know the real life matches the simulation?
The short answer is no. The longer version of that is it really confirms, let's call it the big picture,
Hmm.
right? And I'm putting my hands up right with the vehicle. The big picture is working really well. Now we're at a place where you want to just kind of not tape up seams, but kind of tune aerodynamically around the places that are the most sensitive. And that kind of refinement that follows a very normal development path where you're in the beginning you're making big decisions on and big changes, and then as you go through the process, you just those changes become smaller and smaller. Now it's just a matter of execution and implementation. Let me answer it another way. There's no discovery with the real world validation that would say, oh, we've got to go back and redo this because
Okay.
it, yeah.
Okay, cool. This was another one that we kind of slipped in from the viewers here. When should we expect the full validation numbers, or is there a time frame that you can guesstimate?
That's not my house at all. I
Okay,
can't speak to that. Yeah. I know I mean, it's critical and you must go through and validate and test all these things. It's the right way to develop a product and get it to, into the market.
gotcha. Okay. So this one might be another out of your wheelhouse one, but I heard the rolling test video. He talked about how the test was run multiple times. Do you know how many times it was run?
No, that's not something I'm not involved in the testing and validation program at all.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was just making sure. I was curious there. But okay, so this is the last question here, and it's kind of one that I feel should be self-evident to people who have designed something before, but might be a little bit uh, more difficult a concept to put a handle around when you haven't been there and done that, I suppose. But
Okay.
uh, do you have like a quick way to help people understand why validation testing is both important and why taking your time doing so is a good idea?
Let's see. It is the best part of a program because you're going to find out the truths of everything. And it's
Hmm.
very important that you kind of go through a checklist and that worked, that worked, that worked. Oh, this one didn't quite work. Let's adjust it and see what variables there are. The point you want to get to as obviously as fast as possible. Now, Aptera has their own, let's say, timeline of development that because the vehicle and because of everything, it's let's call it unprecedented.
Hmm.
So they're defining how this process goes. And that's why, in the same manner, it's like you can't compare this vehicle to anything else, even though we're trying really hard to put it in some place or price wise or whatever. It's really difficult to do that. And it's kind of wasted energy, right? Which it's not very efficient. So, from the big picture, it's really important to have those truths come out and validate for them and make any changes necessary. But I think we're on track to, hit all the targets that have been put out there. It's now just implementation.
All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my last question. I'm going to ask you like I did before. Is there anything that you can think of that I didn't ask that you would want to answer?
At the moment, no. I mean, again, I'm talking about how design is influencing and is part of the system that gets the goal, which is this vehicle.
Hmm.
So that's mostly what I can represent.
Gotcha.
But I
Alrighty.
appreciate all the interesting questions. It's good to discuss.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's basically it for the interview. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for paying attention and watching through. This is the Ninjaneer here with Jason Hill. Catch you guys on the flip side.
All right, thank you.